Live from the city that never sleeps. 17 miles from Madison Square Garden, New York City. It's America at Night with Rich Valdez, America's favorite late night talk program, featuring interesting guests from around the world and calls from across America. And now, here is your host, Rich Valdez.
Hi there, good evening, and what's up, America? I am Rich Valdez, Valdez with an S, at Rich Valdez on all of the social media. Welcome to the program. We're live, we're national, 7 minutes past the top of the hour, and a blessing to be here with you. Give me a call, 833-482-5337, 833-4-Valdez, and plenty of stuff going on tonight. In just the last couple of hours, a lot of things developing in the Middle East, as far as I can tell, a lot of new action. And all I can tell you is it's moving very, very quickly. There's a bunch of people that are evacuating, that are trying to leave Gaza. Dozens killed while they were, seeking aid. This aid thing, the aid people were ambushed, apparently. And this again, similar happened the other day. The United States run operation for aid is under attack, right? This is, the best way to put it. And it's very, very, very tough. A lot of gun fire, a lot of everything going on. We're going to sit down and chat with Ruthie Blum, advisor to Prime Minister Netanyahu, former speechwriter for him, as well as editor at the Jewish News Syndicate. But first, I want to get into a couple of the other things that are going on while things in the Middle East, escalate. There's a lot of things. Trump has confirmed that there is finally a U.S.-China trade deal. Now, this is a big deal, right? And thankfully, I think everybody's happy to see that happen. Because why? Well, who wouldn't want to see it? Everybody's concerned about what is going on with the this 90-day deal. So the bare bones that I've got are this. And this is thanks to Rahim Kassam. A framework deal was reached between the U.S. and China during trade talks in London, though it still has to be approved by President Trump and President Xi Jinping. But what it looks like is the Secretary of Commerce, Howard Lutnick, Chinese Vice Commerce Minister Li Changgang have reached a deal. Secretary Bessent was part of those conversations early on, left them yesterday, and they hammered out a deal. So here's what we know. President Trump announcing that this framework deal has been reached. And this is, again, in my opinion, this is good news. The deal has a framework where China will maintain a 10% tariff on U.S. goods, while the U.S. retains a 55% tariff on Chinese goods. The deal also includes commitments for China to resume and increase exports of rare earth minerals that are critical to U.S. industries. In exchange, the United States will provide aerospace parts and semiconductor programming technology to China, along with renewed access for Chinese students to American universities. Look at that. That sounds overly generous. President Trump put this stuff out on Truth Social, saying, "Our deal with China is done, subject to final approval with President Xi and me. Full magnets and any necessary rare earths will be supplied upfront by China." China. So kudos to President Trump and the team for securing that. Now, these talks occurred again in London, and they followed a primary agreement that was reached in Geneva, Switzerland last month. They temporarily paused these tariffs that went over 100%. As you remember, they were at 145% from both countries. Now, the current tariffs have been reduced to 30% for U.S. imports from China and 10% for Chinese imports from the U.S., and which could spike again if the elements of the deal are not finalized before July 9th. That's part of the deal as well, to make sure that they're finalized by July 9th. So this is very good. Now, China's state-run media has acknowledged new progress, is what they're calling it, in the talks, but offered no specifics. Vice Commerce Minister Li Chenggang confirmed the framework was agreed upon in principle. So that's that. Sounds like a lot of work getting done. And of course, what is it today? Day six of the violence, the insurrection, the riots. What I like to say is LA is a war zone. And of course, those on the left are making all sorts of excuses, saying the military is being used against Americans. They're using drones to attack Americans. All I can say is, look, you either love America or you don't. And Trump has a responsibility to this country and to everybody that voted for him to either defend this country or not defend it. And I, for one, I love this country, and I expect President Trump to defend it. It's that simple. So kudos to him for doing what he's doing. There's been a lot of pushback from a lot of people. I don't know why people are so up in arms about the United States Marines backing up the National Guard and the president nationalizing these forces and putting them into Los Angeles. I don't see it. I understand everybody wants to avoid that, but that's kind of like saying, look, we want to avoid the alarm of having fire trucks run down your street and running fire hoses and whatnot and having to use fire hydrants for water supply because we don't want people to be alarmed. But guess what? If your house is on fire, that's the remedy. And that's exactly what's going on here. So I, for one, I'm happy to see what's going on with President Trump and his course of action. And I've got to say, our conversations last night and the night before, and even some that we'll have tonight, they circled around President Trump doing something that is literally his constitutional duty to do. Of course, other presidents have done similar. This is not President Trump creating a precedent. He's not doing something that's never been done before. But of course, many will say that he is doing something that has not been done before. And some of those people are friends of mine. And they're messaging me saying, oh, come on, he's acting like an a-hole calling in the Marines. This is too much. I think it's too much when you've got cops that are getting concussions because they're getting hit in the head with rocks. It's too much when one video I saw was a mom with kids in the car, and she got out to scold these people saying, get out of the way, I've got kids in the car, and then got into a scuffle with these people while she was out of the car. So what ultimately happens here? We have to respect people. We have to protect moms in the streets with their children. If we don't, who will? President Trump has an absolute duty to defend this country, and I'm glad that he's using the Marines to do it. Period. The end. Now, straight ahead, we're going to have our conversation with Ruthie Blum, get the latest on what's going on in Israel and so much more that's happening in the Middle East. So keep it locked right here. Don't go anywhere. Rich Valdez with you all night long. I'll be right back.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez.
Well, thank you, Rich, and thank you for everything. I know you very well, and I listen, but I have a lot of people that listen, and they love your show, and I appreciate it very much.
America at Night with Rich Valdez.
All right, America, welcome back. Rich Valdez, keeping you company all night long. And right now, I'm always happy to bring her on the show. We usually talk to her via telephone because she's in Jerusalem. Today, she's in New York City, former advisor in the office of Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and senior editor at JNS. And she's also a podcast host. Ruthie Blum, welcome back.
Thank you for having me, Rich.
You bet. So there's always so much to talk about. It seems like every day, I don't know, you give it half a day, 3 hours, 4 hours, and there's a new story on what Iran is doing to destroy Israel, to try to get more nuclear uranium enrichment to come at the United States. Who can they fund in their latest proxy war? And I want to get your assessment. You're on the ground in Jerusalem. What's the latest?
Well, the latest is that Israel is very concerned about these negotiations between the Trump administration and the Ayatollahs. That's what I like to say, because it's not Iran. Mm-hmm. It's not the Iranian people.
Right.
It's this awful regime, very, very dangerous. Now, President Trump definitely understands that, and that is why he is saying no nukes and no uranium enrichment. The trouble is, and I believe that Prime Minister Netanyahu thinks this, though he doesn't say it. I'm saying this as me now, that there is no such thing as a good deal, because even when, if and when Iran ever agrees to anything, it violates it. So it's not worth anything if it agrees. But in the meantime, it's been stalling, because every minute that nothing is happening and Israel isn't attacking its facilities, it has time to bury them deeper. We've had intelligence reports that that's sort of what's going on. But having said that, obviously Prime Minister Netanyahu is not going to go up against President Trump. He's the greatest ally Israel has ever had, and so is the United States, but in particular President Trump. And when Trump asked him, please, to hold off on any military action in the meantime, at the moment, because he's trying to do these negotiations. So that's where we stand right now. Just, I want to add one thing.
Sure.
Yesterday or the day before, I'm confused because my time zone is a little screwed up from coming to New York from Tel Aviv. Trump and Netanyahu had a phone conversation, and after that conversation, the media reported it one way, as though it's the end of the U.S.-Israel relationship. But right afterwards, Netanyahu convened a secret security cabinet meeting. And my belief is that that contrary to what the media, how they're reporting it, that actually Netanyahu and Trump are in lockstep. And that's the reason that Netanyahu called a high-level security cabinet meeting. Because I think there's preparations, perhaps, for I mean, I don't want to tell the enemy what we're going to do. And luckily, I don't have inside info on that. But this is my assessment.
Yeah, well, I would imagine whether you have inside info or not, I think you have a better inside track, having served both with Netanyahu and as a journalist out of Jerusalem, that you understand things, I think, a little bit better than most of the fake news media in America that's trying to constantly. I just saw a headline I shared with you. There was a headline that said that Puerto Rico is no longer going to have ties with the U.S. They're joining Spain again. The things that the media puts out there are just laughable sometimes. And not to mean it couldn't happen, but it's not going to happen today, and not that way. So with that in mind, there's lots of reports regarding the ceasefire with Hamas, and that they don't do it. They do it. Some people were trying to get food, they say. Then I saw a letter that said, don't come here before 5 a.m. because it's at a military base, and it looks like you're ambushing us, that type of thing. What is the story with this controversy, from your opinion?
Okay, so the story is, it is such fake news. And by the way, not only the American press. You think that the Israeli press, I mean, most of it, not all, just like you're not a member of the rest of the press, they're just so progressive, left-wing. You can't trust them at all, and they quote one another, You'll have an Israeli paper in Hebrew writing what? Axios said, or the New York Times. Then the New York Times takes it back from them. It's all this game of telephone, and it's a lot of misinformation and disinformation.
Right.
Now, this situation with the humanitarian aid in Gaza is this. Finally, we have a coordinated effort to help the people of Gaza get food that Hamas cannot steal. Up until just very recently, the UN, which is in cahoots with Hamas, was delivering trucks. Hamas was stealing it, though they didn't have to work too hard to steal it, because the UN, as I said,
was delivering
UNRWA,
it to them.
they really are pro-Hamas, and
they've
many
been caught in
employees
the past cheering them on.
and employees of,
Right.
of UNRWA or Hamas operatives, etc. Anyway, so then we now have the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, an American company with Israeli soldiers guarding it, not distributing the food. Every day, 1 million, I don't know what you'd call it, plates or trays of food have been delivered, and Hamas cannot get it. And why is this really, really important? Because anybody who controls the food, especially in a terrorist enclave like Gaza, is king. And it doesn't matter whether the people of Gaza support Hamas. I mean, they voted for Hamas, etc. And it doesn't matter whether they do or they don't or whatever. But you have to kowtow to the people who are giving you the food.
Clearly, if they're giving you food.
But
you
I
have
will
to do what
also
they
point
say.
out they never were giving them the food. Hamas was stealing the free food that the UN was providing Gaza and selling it to Gazans at exorbitant prices. And I'm not kidding. A pack of cigarettes for $1,200. I'm not joking.
Wow.
Okay, and you'd wonder, interesting, where do the Gazans get $1,200 to buy a cigarette? I'm just saying, a sack of flour for 100 times the price, etc. They were selling it because that money they were getting, first of all, it's part of their control. Second of all, that money helped them stay in power and keep their terrorist machine going. So now they have severed, a joint Israel-United States operation severed Hamas from the food distribution. And that has really freed up a lot of Gazans, to protest against Hamas openly.
And for the first time ever, I saw a bunch of Palestinians marching in the streets, thanking the Americans.
And
saying
exactly,
a lot of nice things.
Having a heart saying President Trump, thank
Yeah,
you,
right.
etc. And many more are admitting they want to leave Gaza and they're only too happy. You know, President Trump has this fantasy, it may be a reality, but at the moment it's a fantasy about, turning Gaza into this Riviera on the Mediterranean, but first you empty out. Now, his attackers are saying, you're trying to, exterminate the Palestinians. No. He said, I want them to have a better life. Then we'll clean up Gaza, and then anybody who wants to live there can, or something like that. Now, whether it'll happen or not is not the point. The point is that Gazans want to leave. And unfortunately, all those hypocrites in the world, among them the Arab states and the Europeans, don't want to take them in. So, it's all well and good to say those poor Gazans, but Europe wants them to stay there and suffer. That's basically what they mean by saying don't let him out, right?
Yeah.
So there are very good signs right now. Now, the biggest problem Israel has with the hostages is that we care about every single person, unlike Hamas that hides behind its own people. Human Shield took all those hostages on October 7th, 2023, and there are still 55 remaining ones. Of those 55, 20 or 23, we're not quite sure at the moment, are alive. The rest are dead, but everyone wants them home for a proper burial. And Israel's being very careful. That's why Hamas doesn't want to release them and keeps upping the ante. Okay, so now give us back the food distribution. Okay, you want them back? Have a ceasefire for 5 years. Basically, they want to stay in power. And this we cannot accept. Cannot.
Right. It makes sense. Amigos, we're on with Ruthie Blum, former advisor in the office of Benjamin Netanyahu and senior editor over at JNS. And we're going to come back to this conversation. In particular, Ruthie, I want to ask you about the comments that Ambassador Huckabee made recently regarding a Palestinian state and your thoughts on how that might proceed in the future. Keep it locked right here. I'm Rich Valdez.
This is America. This is Night. This is Rich Valdez.
All right, amigos, welcome back. We continue our conversation with Ruthie Blum, and you heard the remarks from from Ambassador Mike Huckabee. I believe, to paraphrase, he said, "Sure, there can be a Palestinian state. It just can't be right here next to Israel." And I want to get your reaction to that, and moreover, what you think what do we do with all these people? Because just as an aside, I saw a video of a border wall in Egypt, and it had one layer, and then it had another layer, and it had another layer, and it went like 7 layers deep, and with armed guards. And I thought to myself, jokingly, Trump should have hired these guys to build the border wall in the United States. But in reality, what you're saying is true. The neighbors immediately surrounding Gaza aren't looking for them to move into their neighborhood. So what do these people do? Okay,
so on the contrary, it's not just that they're not looking to. Egypt doesn't want a single Palestinian to come through there. They've allowed a few ill children to go to hospitals in Egypt. They don't want them because it's Muslim Brotherhood. Egypt spent all this time trying to eliminate has outlawed the Muslim Brotherhood. So they don't want them. Jordan doesn't want them. They'll topple his regime. One more Palestinian, which is, Jordan has a huge Palestinian population. He doesn't want them. It's all well and good to get on their high horse and say Israel is responsible. That's number one. You asked me about Mike Huckabee. So first of all, I'd like to say we just love Ambassador Huckabee, and I'm not being sarcastic. Really, genuinely love him. I was going to say he's a godsend, but actually Trump sent him to Israel. I know Trump would like to be compared to God. He's tough but gentle. He's sweet but sticks to his guns. He's got this great combination. And what he said 2 things recently. And one was in response to President Emmanuel Macron of France, attacking Israel and saying that we're committing all kinds of war crimes, et cetera, et cetera. And Ambassador Huckabee said to Macron, and because Macron was going to join this upcoming summit and to recognize, just unilaterally recognize Palestinian statehood. So Ambassador Huckabee said to Macron, really? You want a Palestinian state? Why don't you take part of the French Riviera and give it to the Palestinians? And more recently, what he said was, not in our lifetime, in the United States is not recognizing a Palestinian state. And it might not happen in our lifetime, if it ever does. It might not. And you see, when you ask me what to do with these people, et cetera, the biggest problem with the Palestinians is that their education is to martyrdom, to kill Jews and you go to heaven, go to paradise. These children are raised. Now, this isn't only in Gaza. It's also in Judea and Samaria, which anti-Israel people call the West Bank, in the Palestinian Authority, which is why also conservatives like me in Israel, we oppose the Palestinian Authority taking control of Gaza as well.
But now the Palestinian Authority and Hamas don't necessarily get along.
Oh, they don't at all. They don't at all because, you see, in 2005, Israel basically yanked every single Jew out of Gaza, okay? They certainly never touched a Palestinian, never pulled any of those out, and that was okay. You just forcibly pulled out the Jews who were peacefully settled near the Gaza border, and they pulled them. I don't mean they, Israel did that. On the grounds that there were so many Hamas suicide bombings, and we were unable to prevent them. So at the time, Prime Minister Ariel Sharon said, okay, that's it. We've got to just get out of Gaza. They called it disengagement, which really meant just withdraw every Israeli, every last Jew from there. And what happened was immediately rockets flying. It's true, the suicide bombings went down a bit. The rest is history. And that was 19 years ago, whatever. Yeah. Or actually, when in 2005, that's 20 years ago. Yeah. But what happened was the Palestinians had elections, and Hamas, though it's not clear who actually won, it's possible that Fatah, which is the main party of the Palestinian Authority, won, or it was close, and Hamas just began to throw them off the rooftops and kill them, and, it's a bloodlust culture, I'm telling you. And Fatah seems to some people to be more moderate because some of them wear suits and ties. They're not moderate. They just have a different plan of stages of annihilating the Jewish state. They also hate the West. They also, but they're in competition with one another.
Right.
And so we cannot have the Palestinian Authority running Gaza either. What's going to happen, I don't know. I'll just tell you something. It is really, really frustrating. Every year, all the time, Israelis would say, peaceniks, well, then what's the solution? What's the solution? There's a demographic problem. We can't rule over all that. What's the solution? Now, in the Middle East, the solution is you bide your time. Things change. First of all, the demography changed. Do you know that Israel has the highest birth rate of the Western world,
Wow.
and is overtaking the birth rate of Arabs in Israel as well.
Wow.
So in the past, it was always, their birth rate is high. So you sometimes cannot make a policy based on, what's going to happen. That's why when the October 7th massacre happened, on October 8th, already you had the progressives saying, what will be the day after? What will be the day after? Wait, let us first attack the enemy who just succeeded at slaughtering 1,200 people, raping, beheading, burning. You have to be graphic because I think people have forgotten what happened on that day.
And the other side is equally as graphic, right? They're constantly saying it's ethnic cleansing. And I'm not saying that I'm taking a side. I just think that you have to be fair. Right, you have to be fair in how you're going to call the game, and
Exactly.
when you have these people, the terrorists that came and killed people on October 7th, burning babies, slitting throats, raping old ladies, this is horrific, and I understood and I'm not going to say agreed with, but related to the ire of the prime minister at that time, because who does that? And when you're in charge, you've got to be responsible for your people and respond in kind. So I think that it's appropriate, and I understand why he's, why Trump is holding his hand at times. I totally get it. I put myself in his shoes, and I think, man, I don't know if you could hold me back. That was a very serious thing that happened. But you mentioned they give some of these people respect because they wear ties and suits. And there's a guy named Al-Jalani who is now named Al-Shara, and he has a suit and tie now. But he was a terrorist before, at least by my standards, right? And I'm going to try and be fair and say, maybe because I'm an American, I call people that I don't agree with terrorists when they kill Americans. Maybe, right? But this is a very interesting deal, right? This former Al-Qaeda leader that's now head of state.
Not only Al-Qaeda, but also ISIS. He was a member of both and switched over, and I can't remember which first and which second, but it had nothing to do with switching his ideology. It was an internal fight among the terrorists. Now, he was a terrorist. I'm not going to say is, because let's say you want to give someone the benefit of the doubt who says he renounces it. I'm very skeptical because I think it's a ploy for him because he's taking over Syria, and we see that that his forces are going after Druze, going after Christians. There's a lot of chaos in there, and the question is he controlling it? Israel had a rocket recently from Syria, and the answer from our, and our defense minister said, basically to Jalani or Al-Shar, said to him, "You're responsible. Whatever's going on, you gotta rein in your people." Or we'll see if he has changed his spots. I don't see any evidence other than the suit and tie so far. But again, we can talk in a year and let's see.
Right, like you said,
what
time
unfolds.
matters.
It always matters. It always matters. And you always have to be skeptical of somebody who's a radical Islamist because the ideology is so powerful. And also in Islam, even not radical Islam, Islam has certain, I'm not an expert on Islam, but experts have told me they have all kinds of ploys, like things that are called a ceasefire. They're temporary. It's like a truce before you kill each other again. Or there's also, it's legitimate to pull the wool over someone's eyes, to fake him out in order to do what you want in the meantime. Of course, I'm saying that in very, slangy language.
Yeah.
But I don't know, and I don't know what he's up to. But I would be I'm sure that the Israeli government is watching him like a hawk.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Amigos, we're going to continue our conversation with Ruthie Blum and find out how'd she get into this to begin with. Don't go anywhere.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez. America at Night with Rich Valdez.
All right, America, welcome back. Rich Valdez keeping you company all night. Our special guest, Ruthie Blum, former advisor in the office of Benjamin Netanyahu. She's a senior editor and podcast host at JNS, and she's with us now. Ruthie Blum, I want to continue our really good conversation. I could do this all day, and because really it's just you're a wealth of information. But this show was once the Larry King show before it was the Jim Bohannon show, and before it was my show. And one of Larry's favorite questions was, how does a nice girl like you get involved in a thing like this?
Wow. If I could give you, I don't like to lie and I don't like to fake people out. But the question is, how personal can I get about how I ended up in this business? So I'll have to leave out some of the details. But
Sure.
The short answer is, how I ended up in Israel was that I was a teenager. I met an Israeli. I thought, I'm in love. I'm going to go to Israel and see how it works out.
And you were born in New York.
Oh, yeah. I grew up. I'm American.
Yeah.
And so I went to Israel for a year program at the university, and we broke up, but I fell in love with Israel. It grabbed me. Some Jews go to Israel and they say, this is so foreign to me. I mean, it's a nice place and all that, but I don't know, the language, and people are rude and noisy, and, it's really very it's Western, but it's also very Middle Eastern.
Yeah.
And a lot of people go and they say, well, it's great and we like to visit, but I wouldn't want to live there. And others like me, I just fell in love. I can't explain it, but I felt like everybody looks like me here. Everybody's noisy like me. So I ended up staying and finishing my degree there. And then I got married, I had children. And how I got into this profession is probably because it runs in my family. My father was the editor of Commentary magazine for 35 years. Today, my brother is the editor of Commentary magazine. But I really thought that all I want to do is be a housewife and have a lot of babies. So I did have a lot of babies, and I was a housewife. But then I got divorced. And so then I think writing and editing just came naturally to me, and that's how I ended up. How I ended up working for Prime Minister Netanyahu was that I've been writing for years, defending him and all that, and I ended up working as a speechwriter. But then when the October 7th war broke out, there was many people in that office were switching jobs. We were doing kind of, various all hands on deck kind of thing. And it was a lot of trying to explain to the world what's going on, because it didn't take, we knew it right on October 7th, before when the 250 people had been kidnapped into Gaza and all those rapes and murders and everything. Before we even had a chance to take a breath, we knew that we have 5 minutes of legitimacy before the world attacks us. And in fact, that's what happened. And so there was a whole office set up to answer questions, from CNN, all these hostile reporters saying, before we even launched a ground invasion into Gaza, there was already attacks on us about using excessive force in Gaza. Yeah.
They were ahead of the game.
Oh, yeah. They were at the ready.
Unbelievable. So you're still in the thick of it. You spend most of your time in Israel now.
Oh, I live in Israel. I'm just visiting New York right now.
And is it, I'm visiting Israel soon, and a lot of people have asked me, is it safe? I hear they're at war. What's the answer to that?
Well, it's funny because before the broadcast, I told you, you're used to your own dangers. Yeah. So I come from, missile-torn Israel, and I'm afraid to take the subway in New York City because I think everybody's going to get raped and set on fire in the subway. It is safe for you to go there. For one thing, when we now have an early alert. Listen, we've been having a lot of Houthi missiles. That's not so many from Gaza, and the ones here and there stray rockets from Gaza are not hitting the center of the country or Jerusalem, Tel Aviv, Haifa. They're only right near Gaza, the Gaza border. It's the Houthis from Yemen who have been firing these missiles 2,000 kilometers away, something like that. Ballistic missiles, serious ones. Luckily, because they take so long to arrive, we have an early warning system, and at least it gives the 1.5 million Israelis who have to run to bomb shelter at least a few minutes to do it.
Excellent. Now, Ruthie Blum, for people who are enamored by this conversation and love the sound of your voice, how do they hear your podcast, and how do they learn more about the work you're doing?
Okay, so first of all, jns.org. It's Jewish News Syndicate. We have news every day. We're a website with news, columns. I'm a columnist, not a news reporter. And my podcast is called Israel Undiplomatic, which can be heard on Spotify, all the Apple tunes, Spotify, but mainly on YouTube. Israel Undiplomatic.
Israel Undiplomatic with Ruthie Blum. Ruthie, I want to thank you for being here. You are a gentlewoman, a scholar, and a patriot. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Rich. Loved having you. I love being here.
Amigos, we return right after this.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez.
All right, America, welcome back. Rich Valdez keeping you company all night long. And our phone number is 833-482-5337, 833-4-Valdez. And I want to play a little clip for you. This is, again, a protester this week in California. And it's just interesting to hear what they have to say. Check this out.
You were just asked about the First Amendment rights issues. In the president's comments yesterday, though, he just said protesters would be strongly dealt with. In your list before, you referred to insurrectionists, rioters, and protesters together. Obviously, they're quite different from your earlier answer. I'm struck by the fact that the president has not at any point said the most important thing here is to protect the First Amendment rights of peaceful protesters. So I'm wondering, where in his hierarchy of interests does he place that? Is the First Amendment protection the most important? Is stopping violence most important? Why is he not out saying all peaceful protesters will be protected?
I think two things can be important at the same time. And the president, as I just answered, supports the right of Americans to peacefully protest. He supports the First Amendment. But that is not the majority of the behavior that we have seen taking place in Los Angeles. We have seen mobs of violent rioters and agitators assaulting law enforcement officers, assaulting our federal immigration authorities. And we have seen, as I said,
assaulting and assaulting and assaulting. And it just doesn't end. I mean, it's yesterday it was rocks. Today it's just people getting in their faces. The whole thing is, in my opinion, out of control. I think the federal troops are helping to control the situation. But, man, I personally think, again, yeah, I'm a free speech guy, and you have to respect people's free speech rights. People want to stand on the sidewalk and wave a flag and wave and wear a T-shirt and say something and tell the cops to go F themselves. That's their right. But it's not their right to hurt the cops. It's not their right to hurt people. It's not their right to, in my opinion, kidnap people or stop people from being able to move about. This is, in effect, they're arresting people. They're detaining people who are trying to get to work. And that's when you start seeing people act out in fear. Right? All these videos you've got of people driving and plowing through crowds that are trying to stop them when they're trying to stop traffic. This stopping traffic thing, this is not a form of peaceful protest. I mean, I would think I was getting carjacked if somebody did that to me. So anyway, we're going to continue the conversation. We've got plenty to discuss tonight, so keep it locked for all 3 hours. If this is the end of the road for you, hasta la próxima. Take care, good night, and God bless you, America. But if it's not, keep it locked right here. We're coming back, and we're going to have an excellent conversation this evening. Plenty more to discuss with me, Rich Valdez. Don't.
Live from the city that never sleeps. 17 miles from Madison Square Garden, New York City. It's America at Night with Rich Valdez. America's favorite late-night talk program, featuring interesting guests from around the world and calls from across America. And now, here is your host, Rich Valdez.
Hi there, good evening, and what's up, America? I am Rich Valdez, Valdez with an S, at Rich Valdez on all of the social media. Welcome to our program this evening. It is 7 minutes past the top of the hour. Our phone number, if you want to join us, we're live and national, 833-482-5337, 833-4-Valdez. Day number 6 of the riots, the insurrection, the war that is going on in California. And guess what? It's spreading. It's now in New York City. Protests are escalating there. We heard about the bomb squad getting called out last night in Chicago. You've seen some of the footage that came out of Miami on social media, or Florida, I should say. And there's been talk about these types of insurrections being expected in 35 states. And I believe that we likely will see this nationwide insurrection if we don't handle things quickly. You know, I've been a conservative in my politics most of my life. I was never part of the left, right? Even though I was born to Puerto Rican parents, my parents were Reagan people. They weren't Republicans, and they weren't necessarily politically conservative, but they were relatively culturally conservative because, Hispanics, by and large, tend to be very pro-family. The idea of abortion is frowned upon. At least it was in my era. And I bring all of that up to say that I never had different views. And the reason I say it is because I look at things and I see them a certain way, like many of you do. And eventually, people come around. Right before the show, minutes before the show, or like a minute before the show, somebody called me. This is somebody I went to high school with. He served this country in uniform, and I thank him for his service. And things don't always go great for him. Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. But, he's had some challenging times through the years. And we've talked. But most of our conversations circle around my politics and why it's wrong for me to like Trump. It was always okay to be a Republican as long as, I wasn't a Trump Republican. And people always gave me a pass. They're like, well, you have a background in church. It's all right. You guys are typically Republicans. That's how people look at it. But when Trump came around, it was like, that's it. Nobody's allowed to be his friend. Nobody's allowed to like him. Nobody's allowed to even support anything that he espouses. And that is an idea that I reject. That is an idea that you see regularly in Cuba, regularly in Venezuela, regularly in China. These are the people that will tell you what to think, how to think, when to think, and if you can think it at all. That's not America. That's not liberty. That's not freedom. And that's not the United States. And these are the things that bother me about the left. They claim to be so liberal, but they're so liberal that they're illiberal, right? I mean, they will literally abandon ship when it comes to your rights. They will abandon ship when it comes to doing what is right, all in the name of their quote-unquote progress, which progress for them is more power, more of your paycheck, more taxes so that they can do more of what they do. And we've seen it time and again. So I say all of that, again, to give you a setup here. So this kid I went to high school with calls me, and he says, you know what, you just proved me wrong. And a big part of my life is here to prove people wrong. And I said, why is that? And he said, well, because, he's like, I know about 20 dudes that are in politics all over the state, and they're all Democrats. He said, you're the only one that I know that's a conservative. And I called all of them, and I left you for the end, and you're the only one that picked up. And I said, well, don't count me in just yet because I've got minutes to go before I got to start my show. But I didn't want to, dodge your call or duck you. I said, I'll let you know that I could talk to you later. I just can't talk to you right now. And he said, well, I appreciate it. And he said, then he offered to give me a tip. And he said, I want to send you some money. And I was like, I'll talk to you later. I thought the whole thing was funny, but I bring it up because so many people are up in arms about President Trump and about his use of the military, his use of this. But I'll submit to you, back in 2015, President Trump rode the escalator in Trump Tower, and he said, they're not sending us their best. They're sending us their rapists, their murderers. And he was right. And we saw that happen here. And we saw people of every stripe and color get raped and murdered and beaten by criminal gang member terrorist aliens. We saw that. Now, I'm not saying that to villainize people that come from another country seeking an opportunity. I say that to villainize people that are in gangs that, when was the last time, and again, I'm sure it happens, but I don't see it in the headlines, the Bloods and the Crips are leaving L.A. or Chicago or wherever it is, Latin Kings, leaving the United States to go to some other country to go rape people over there. I've never heard of such a thing. But yet that's exactly what happened here with MS-13. It's exactly what happened here with the Tren de Aragua. Not cool. We should never allow this. But yet Joe Biden not only opened up the back door, he had the front door open too, and was allowing people to come in every which way they felt like coming in. So now that things are out of control, you now have gang members, as Jesse Holguin walked us through, gang members that are sympathetic to the cartels for whatever it is, for henchman work, for protection work, for extortion work, for running work, whatever it is, transportation work, whatever work they do with the cartels. Now the cartels have enlisted them to work with radical left-wing agitators that go out there and tear things up. Every single guest we had on yesterday surmised the same thing on this program, that the real root cause, whether there's money people behind it, and I'm sure there are people with money. Congresswoman Anna Paulina Luna had a great post where she shared the names of some of these rich people, or at least one name, who's funding a lot of this. But ultimately, they're the ones who's putting their hands in their pocket to assist the cartels in being able to do what they do. Transport children, and by transport I mean smuggle, right? Smuggle human beings across the border, because apparently smuggling humans is better money for the cartels than smuggling drugs. And you've got to ask yourself, that's a problem. And you could sit there and say, well, like the cartel guy said when he interviewed with CNN, well, we wouldn't be doing this as much if there wasn't such an appetite for it in the United States. If they didn't want our product, we wouldn't do it. And that's a great cop-out. Like most drug dealers, they say things like, well, look, if I don't do it, somebody else is going to do it. People are going to do it anyway, so I might as well get a piece of the pie. I mean, if you use that logic with everything, it would sound like this. Well, look, I'm not really into raping people and then killing them, but, somebody's out there doing it. I might as well be me. It is ridiculous to think that way. The fact that we tolerate this, and we did for as long as we did during the Biden years, is a disgrace. It's a black eye our country will likely wear for a long time. But to try and give Donald Trump a black eye for trying to do what's right, for standing up for the country where he's raising his grandkids, where his children are running his business and their own businesses, and Americans are trying to make it, and for people to give Trump a hard time when he's looking out really for us, guess what? Trump's a rich guy. Trump owns a really big, beautiful property in Florida, another one in Jersey, another one in Westchester, another one in Turnberry, Scotland. He's got them all over the world. He's got them all over Manhattan. He's got one in the Bronx. He's not a needy guy. And I say that because he doesn't need to do this job. And I think oftentimes we forget, and we misunderstand. We look at things and we say, no, he's doing it because of his ego. Before he hangs his hat up one last time, he wants to say that he was king of the world. Even if that were the case, maybe he would be a halfway decent king of the world if we give him a chance. And I'm not saying we want a king of the world. I'm not saying we should, entertain that idea. But that's the left's idea. The reality is Trump hasn't done anything that's out of turn here. He's not violating or creating new precedent by calling in the National Guard. We learned that from a National Guardsman last night who explained that President Bush, or reminded us, I should say, that President Bush used the Insurrection Act. So what's all this beef about? Well, I think all the beef ultimately becomes people don't want to be wrong. Trump is getting in the way of them making money the way they make money. Ultimately, this all comes back to the cartels. Their money, in my opinion, being messed with. Their business is being messed with. And they want things back the way they were. And they figure we will turn your cities upside down until we get our way. Well, I got news for you. Most of the Americans I know and speak to, they're prepared for the long haul. They're prepared to get in it. They've been doing target practice for years. Hope it doesn't come to that. I suspect that it won't. But you'd be foolish to think that America would just hand itself over to an enemy. Don't go anywhere.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez.
Well, thank you, Rich, and thank you for everything. I know you very well, and I listen, but I have a lot of people that listen, and they love your show, and I appreciate it very much.
America at Night with Rich Valdez.
Yesterday, the United States announced that it is sanctioning La Chapitos, a powerful faction of the Mexico-based Sinaloa cartel, along with its two fugitive leaders. The United States is also designating a regional network of Los Chapitos associates and businesses based in Mazatlan, Mexico. This network engages in drug trafficking, extortion, kidnapping, and money laundering. Under Secretary Marco Rubio, the State Department will continue to protect our nation by keeping illicit drugs off our streets and disrupting the revenue streams funding Mexico-based cartels' violent and criminal activity.
So that's a report that says that Los Chapitos, the children of El Chapo Guzman, Joaquin El Chapo Guzman, the drug kingpin of the Sinaloa cartel, are getting into all sorts of stuff, right? And of course, a deal was cut with Los Chapitos as they were charged with certain crimes and I guess let off with a lot of other crimes as part of a deal. But the bigger question here is they're doing this to protect their commerce. All of them, not just the Sinaloa cartel, but every cartel. It's no coincidence that everybody who's in the know and has their finger on the pulse is saying, yeah, it's likely the cartels that are funneling this money one way or another. Even if some rich guys are throwing money around at the problem, this is mainly affecting the cartels. And this is problematic. So I want to get to the bottom of this from our guest, Chris Moritz, Senior Advisor to the U.S. Department of Commerce during President Trump's first administration. He's with us now. Chris Moritz, welcome back, sir.
Hi, nice to be with you.
You bet. Now, you've written a book called Failed State, A Portrait of California in the Twilight of Empire. And I want to get your take on this hypothesis that myself and others have, that the cartels are heavily involved in these insurrections that we're seeing spreading across the country. Your thoughts?
So I don't think you're far off. I think we can answer that in the following manner. Who makes up these rioters, these protesters, these rioting protesters? Mm-hmm. It is a combination of paid anarchist agitators, legitimate aggrieved activists, and illegal alien gangs. Now, the illegal alien gangs or the even just kind of domestic, for Latino gangs in California are all aligned, if not directly reporting to, the Mexican drug cartels and their proxies in California. And The cartels have more or less controlled organized crime in the state for at least the last decade. They moved in to take over the drug or narcotic distribution market sometime in the late 2000s. And they made a proposition to the kind of legacy black gangs, the Bloods and the Crips, who controlled that market up until that point. And they said to them, well, if we catch you selling dope without paying us tribute and without our sanction, we will cut your head off. And they meant it. And they did it. So it was in short order that the cartels executed this hostile takeover and took over all the kind of narcotics trade, and then through that organized crime. But their most lethal weapon in California is controlling these domestically based gangs that are all reporting to prison gangs like the Mexican mafia, which effectively rule the street. So the prisons rule the street, paradoxically, and the prison gangs ultimately answer to the cartels.
Wow, what a tangled web. But it's ultimately trickles right back to the cartels. Now, tell me what you know about how affected they are financially by the secure border that President Trump has enacted on our southern border.
Well, 60% of the nation's fentanyl, illegal fentanyl, comes through ports of entry in California. That's many, many tens, if not probably $100 billion.
Wow.
Every single person that crossed the border during the Biden years, the Biden invasion, according to Tom Homan, who I spoke to for my book, every single one of these border crossers has paid the cartels, just like with the dope trade in LA and in California. They all have to get sanctioned from this higher authority. So it's an enormous amount of money at stake and also power, raw power.
Folks, we're on with Chris Moritz. He's the author of Failed State, A Portrait of California in the Twilight of Empire. And Chris, would you say this is going to, how would you, I guess with a minute to go, how do you think this ends with the Marines on the ground, with the National Guard on the ground? Are we able to get a hold of this, or does it get further out of hand like we're seeing it spill over into New York and Chicago and other areas?
Yeah, look, it may spread as the raids kind of continue in other cities. I wouldn't be surprised by that. And that's going off the precedent of how the Summer of Love, George Floyd riots spread. But I don't think that it's going to get worse in LA. I think with the presence that President Trump put in place, I expect things to settle down.
All right. And amigos, I want to continue this conversation, in particular how these progressive policies in California have pretty much prioritized criminals over anybody else and what that's costing people in California. So, Chris Moritz, stick with me. Folks, we're coming right back with Chris Moritz. He is the author of the book that I recommend you get, Failed State, A Portrait of California in the Twilight of Empire. And we're coming right back. I'm Rich Valdez.
America at Night with Rich Valdez.
So let me get this straight, just so I could clarify it. You don't want to go back to Mexico. You're protesting to stay away from Mexico, but you're waving the Mexican flag and you're waving it with pride. You're waving it in the United States, the country you're trying to stay in, the country you don't want to leave, but yet you're waving the Mexican flag with pride. Okay. That seems normal to you? That seems logical? That's not stupid at all? None of that's stupid. All right. You guys are an embarrassment to the Mexican culture and to the United States culture. You guys are an embarrassment to everybody around you. and you should be ashamed of yourself. Do better.
Do better. Again, that is a viral rant that's all over the place right now by a Mexican guy who just calling it like he sees it. And this seems to be the one that messes everybody up the most. Why are they waving the Mexican flags? And to give you a little bit of insight on that, I mean, I think it has a lot to do with them trying to say this was once Los Angeles, it was once Mexico and that part of California and whatever. But ultimately, this is all about law and order and how it's disappearing, how public safety disappearing, how these pro-crime progressive prosecutors are literally coddling criminals, and this is the result. And I, for one, am sick of it, but I want to get some perspective on this from the author of Failed State, A Portrait of California in the Twilight of Empire. Chris Moritz was senior advisor at the U.S. Department of Commerce during the Trump administration. He's with us now. Chris Moritz, what is going on with the erosion of law and order in California?
Yeah, that's a really important question, and it has a history that I think most pertinently brings us to the late 2000s, so 2010, following a Supreme Court decision that found that California's state prison system violated the Eighth Amendment, cruel and unusual punishment because of overcrowding. Because of that mandate from the Supreme Court, California began to adopt the criminal justice reform movement out of universities like Stanford Law School that purported that mass incarceration was a crisis that was based in racism and in his kind of racial injustice, and that had to be corrected by way of de-incarceration. So laws that came into about during this era, put in place or championed by Jerry Brown, the younger Gavin Newsom as lieutenant governor, Kamala Harris as attorney general, very importantly, started to decriminalize the penal code with crimes that they deemed to be nonviolent, when in fact they were not nonviolent. It was a manipulation of language that is really at the heart of the unraveling of criminal justice in the state, and with laws like the famous Prop 47 that decriminalized theft under $950 by rendering it a toothless misdemeanor. So it's a culture of enablement. It's a culture of inversion where the rights of criminals and repeat offenders over and over and over again take precedence over the basic expectation of safety, and then beyond that, justice for ordinary good people in this state.
What role can we put on these pro-crime progressive prosecutors that don't prosecute anyone and nothing but coddling criminals, and the crazy billionaires that fund these guys? Well,
fortunately, the worst of the worst are gone. That being George Gascon in Los Angeles. He was voted out with a 64% margin. Pamela Price, truly the worst, actually. She makes Gascon look rather tough. Wow. This was a DA of Oakland who actually was recalled. And Chesa Boudin, San Francisco. It just goes on and on. But all of these people had something in common, which was millions of dollars flowed into their campaigns from entities affiliated with George Soros, principally, but not exclusively. Other billionaire foundations committed to this idea of, quote, criminal justice reform that is again, it is in and of itself a euphemism for, I would say, jettisoning the social contract and the very foundation that the government is to protect its citizens from rampant crime.
Now, what would the purpose be? Do you think that is because of racial justice? Do you think that's because they want to see their property values fall? They want to see California fall? I mean, what is the end game or the goal here Because other than messing with, public safety and making things bad, I don't see the upside.
It's baffling, right? And what I found in my research was that there are for sure ideological currents that are just part of being in that class, right? There is a kind of sense of animosity towards middle class people and just ordinary people, and therefore they look for ways to kind of vitiate like their life standards and lifestyles, and in favor of the so-called like oppressed. So there's that construct. But then I think if we dig a little deeper, we find that with respect to George Soros, I learned that he was heavily investing and has been heavily investing in private security. So all the while that he's undermining public security, he's investing in private security. And he's not alone. Some of his sort of fellow travelers like Pierre Omidyar of eBay was caught doing the exact same thing. So, it's an interesting angle, and it was corroborated to me by not only law enforcement who have moved into private security and would be in a position to know, but top traders on Wall Street said this is kind of a dirty secret, and the former head of Federal Security LAX. So I had reason to believe that this was the case. And private security is a booming business in California. It's bigger than anywhere else in the country. Yeah. Yeah.
Now, we'd seen this happen in Pennsylvania, in Chicago, in New York, and typically the ruse used was, well, we felt too many black men were incarcerated erroneously, and this is the way to achieve justice without, changing any laws. We'll just not prosecute for certain crimes. And that made sense to me. But ultimately, I feel like, the cost-benefit analysis is, off the charts. And it's one that the public won't get behind. Now, Chris, I have to take a pause right here, but I want to come back and get a couple of follow-up questions with you and then wrap up and let everybody know how they can get a copy of the book. So stick with me. Amigos, we're coming right back with Chris Moritz, former senior advisor to the Department of Commerce during the Trump administration and the author of the book Failed State, A Portrait of California in the Twilight of Empire.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez.
Listen, I like your show. It's the best night show there is. I think you got the best spirit, the best emotions. You're real. You're really a good guy.
America at Night with Rich Valdez.
All right, amigos, welcome back. Rich Valdez with you this evening, and our phone number is 833-482-5337, 833-4-VALDEZ. I want to come back to our guest, Chris Moritz, former senior advisor at the U.S. Department of Commerce during President Trump's first term, as well as the author of the book Failed State, A Portrait of California in the Twilight of Empire. And Chris, I want you to share some, final thoughts, what people can take away from the book, as well as letting them know where to go to get it.
Sure. Well, thanks, Rich. I think the takeaway is to look at California as it is the ghost of Christmas future. It is the fate of empires in their death throes. It is a slow-moving suicide that is self-inflicted, of course, and for reasons that are in some ways beyond kind of any kind of logic, right? There is, of course, corruption in this story. There is, of course, evil at play through cartels we talked about. But at the end, it's a failure of a political class that has prioritized the consolidation of its own power. And for that reason and for that reason alone, at the expense of ordinary people and the most basic right that they have in a constitutional republic, which is the right to not be killed, raped, and murdered in their own homes by illegal alien gang members. I think that's the takeaway. California is a disaster. I don't know what can fix it, if at all. But please, America, look to us and be afraid.
Really well put. Really well put. What a warning. And where do people go to get a copy of this excellent book?
Amazon is the best, I would say, the best spot. And you can check me out on X at Chris G. Moritz.
Outstanding. Chris Moritz, I want to thank you for being here with us. Godspeed to you in the continued work that you're doing, and we'll be in touch again soon for an update.
Thank you.
You bet. And amigos, we will get to your calls momentarily. I want to talk about some of what we discussed a little earlier, which was the importance of law and order. I also want to talk about all of the interesting things that are developing around the world in Gaza and beyond, as well as these pop-up riots, if you will, that are going on across the country. So here's the number, 833-482-5337, 833-4-VALDEZ.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez. Call now, 833-4-VALDEZ. That's 833-482-5337. 833-4-VALDEZ. That's Valdez with an S.
After the guest leaves every night, we're doing open phones, kind of at the heartbeat of America. And you sit there in this radio studio, and suddenly you hear voices. Mobile, Dallas, New York, Miami. And there's kind of a conglomeration of America all in one room.
All right, amigos, welcome back. There's a lot of things I want to discuss, but I want to get to the phones to make sure that everybody gets a chance to weigh in. Let's go to John, Nokesville, Virginia, WMAL in the building. Go right ahead, John. You're on with Rich Valdez.
Hey, Rich, thanks for having me on.
Yes,
great
sir.
program. I've been listening to you the last few months. George Soros is basically primarily a currency trader. And if everything is peaceful, there's no wars, there's no anarchy, there's no coup d'etats, currency stays sort of like level. They don't move that much. When you have tumult in society, it causes currencies to go up and down, especially in reference to each other. He's made his fortune off of human misery because he tries to cause anarchy, riots, things like that make the currencies go volatile, and that's where he makes his money, is trading, what we call arbitraging. When the currency goes up, you sell it. When it goes down, you buy it. If everything's peaceful, there's no movement in currencies. He has made his fortune off of human misery worldwide. That's what he does.
Yeah, listen, it doesn't surprise me. I've read about that. I've read about a lot of things he's into. I mean, the guy's a really wealthy guy, and he's into a lot of things. But bottom line, I think what you're highlighting here is, the practicality of it. But I think that the larger picture, right, the 30,000-foot view here, he's a douche, right? He's a bad guy. He's not a good guy. He's made his money in a less than honorable way, and it has to give you pause. You have to question things and say, why would anybody follow this guy's lead? But lamentably, throughout history, we've seen it. People that have resources, people that have money, Jeffrey Epstein, others, they tend to get their way with a lot of things, despite these things not being the right things. So really good point. Thank you for your call. Shout out to WMAL in the building. And let us continue with your calls. Again, the phone number, 833-482-5337, 833-4-VALDEZ. And if you miss any portion of the interviews we're doing, or you want to share a particular interview, you can go to richvaldez.com. Of course, that is Valdez with an S. And the website will allow you to hit the play button and listen to the episode you want to listen to, and you could share it right from there. You can do all that for free, by the way. And if you want, you can also subscribe to the podcast, which is also free. But this way you'll get a little alert through your podcast app that there's a new episode. So whatever you want to do is up to you. But I know a lot of people are usually send me messages on social media asking how they can get to a particular episode. And, of course, our wonderful company, Cumulus Westwood One, they put them on YouTube as well. So lots of places to get this program once it's over. Let's continue. 833-482-5337. David, San Francisco, California, KSFO. David is one of our favorite callers that loves to disagree. David, go right ahead.
Yeah, it's funny. Rich, I was listening on one of the other affiliates, and you were running an interview with a woman who was tied with Israel. And apparently it's still playing on that affiliate. Was that from a day or so ago?
What are you talking about? The Ruthie Blum interview?
Yeah, it was at
that's today. We did that today. No, we did it today.
So,
some affiliates, I don't know, maybe you're listening to it on delay, but we did that today. But what's on your mind, sir?
Well, I would have liked to ask her who gets the minerals underneath Gaza. The United Nations...
well, I'll ask you now. Who has them now?
Well, according to the United Nations, the Palestinians have them. There's a report that came out from the United Nations Commission on Trade and Development, and it's the basic headline of it was that the Palestinians could be very prosperous if they would just exploit the oil and gas underneath Gaza, and that it comes to hundreds of billions of dollars. And so when you start looking at typical mineral rights, there's a famous economist, Mel Brooks, and in his seminal work, Blazing Saddles, he describes how people moving in on an area can take over the mineral rights simply by piracy. And so hundreds of billions of dollars, you basically, if the people living on top of an area have the mineral rights and you kill them, and you kill every last one of them, then all of a sudden the mineral rights go to the murderer. And
right.
So,
well, I mean, that's typically how wars work in general. To the victor go the spoils. But I would back up a little bit and say this: ask yourself why, if there are such minerals beneath Gaza, why they are not being explored now. Why is it that in 20 years ago, in 2005, right? That's when they kicked the Jews out of there to make this territory, right? Prior to that, it was kind of things were okay. Then they had this little fallout back in 2005. They said no more Jews, and things got a little hectic down there, and it had been hectic for quite a while. But I mean, I think the operative question here is, why haven't they done anything in the 20 years they've been there with respect to that? Why have they been digging up the actual plumbing, the pipes that the UN has sent there through many people's donations, and used those to create makeshift rocket launchers? Why have they, obfuscated this responsibility to do anything effective? And I think the answer is because they're so focused on killing Jews, they're so focused on havoc and mayhem, that they don't care about mineral rights. They just care about dead Jews. It's my take. David, thank you for your call and for bringing up that very important point. Amigos, we continue. More calls, more thoughts, more opinions, and another guest straight ahead. Keep it locked right here. I'm Rich Valdez.
Live from the city that never sleeps. 17 miles from Madison Square Garden, New York City. It's America at Night with Rich Valdez. America's favorite late night talk program, featuring interesting guests from around the world and calls from across America. And now, here is your host, Rich Valdez.
Hi there, good evening, and what's up, America? I am Rich Valdez, Valdez with an S, at Rich Valdez on all of the social media. Welcome to another hour of the program, 7 minutes past the top of the hour. We're live and national. If you want to join us on our late night national town hall conversation, give me a call, 833-482-5337, 833-4-VALDEZ. And I want to get to, of course, some of your calls this hour. I also want to get into a little bit of some of the other stuff that's going on. We spent a lot of time talking about what's happening in the Middle East. We spent a lot of time talking about what's happening domestically with the small war that's going on, in California. And I want to spend a little time talking about, things that matter to people, like mental health, right? Because clearly these people in California are mentally ill. They're deranged. And at least it's clear to me, right? And if I'm wrong, I'll stand corrected on that. But I think you've got to be kind of suffering from something, not simply because you disagree, but because of the way you're disagreeing. I disagree with people all the time, and I don't go and throw rocks at police cars. I don't go and stand in front of their cars. I don't go and, taunt the police. I don't do any of those things. And, I guess maybe they'll say, oh, because you're soft. Maybe those guys are gangsta. I don't know. But I will say it reeks of que tan loco, right? As my dad would say, that they're crazy. And I say crazy, and I use it in probably the wrong sense, of course. But mental health is a big thing, and we need to always focus on that. And I like to include it as part of what we talk about here because oftentimes those are some of the, at least for me, some of the most fascinating topics when we learn about, what's going on, why people's brains behave the way they do, etc. But before we get into the mental health stuff, I want to talk about some of the things that are going on in the news. Remember this ultra-lefty guy? His name is David Hogg. He is a survivor of the Parkland school shooting in Florida. And he became the vice chair of the Democrat National Committee. Well, Axios, as I don't know how much of this you can believe, but Axios is reporting that David Hogg is now out at the DNC and he will not run for another term or whatever. He won't run to be DNC vice chair after his and Malcolm Kenyatta's elections were both vacated. And that's according to a spokesperson from the DNC. The votes were based on a technical complaint, but come as Democrats have expressed fury with Hogg for simultaneously serving as a top party official while supporting congressional primary candidates. Hogg announced in April that his group, Leaders We Deserve, would spend $20 million trying to oust Democrat incumbents in safely blue districts. Now, why would you do that? Because they're not progressive enough. Now, his organization endorsed 37-year-old Virginia State Delegate Irene Shin in the open primary that was replacing the late Congressman Jerry Connolly's seat. So today, earlier this afternoon, there was a decisive vote with 75% of the 393 participating Democrat National Committee members voting to kick him out, vacate his election, and 25% of them voting to keep him. Isn't that something? So David Hogg, hasta la vista. You know what? That's good news for Democrats. Maybe they can salvage themselves because it was guys like Hogg and his anti-gun positions, his anti-American positions, his anti-a lot of things positions weren't going to help, right? Most Americans are not on that page. Now, that's what's going on with Democrats there, but it doesn't end there. When you have these types of extreme Democrats, right, like who I like to call the AOC crowd, the all-out crazy crowd, they don't really relate to everybody. They relate to the elite, right? I think for the most part, when you hear people like Jake Tapper or, I don't know, Nicole Wallace, you pick the person that's an opinion host. Oftentimes, they're subduing their very, 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 not just liberal, but progressive opinions. and positions on things. And sometimes they're not, right? Sometimes they'll all show. Or like in the case of Terry Moran was saying that Trump is hate-filled and Stephen Miller is hate-filled and basically, hating on these guys and then trying to parade around as a journalist. And that's oftentimes what they do. And they try to conceal it, but it always comes out. And he ended up, I think, being dismissed from ABC News as I understand it. But all of that is, par for the course, right? It's going to happen because ultimately the left, they just want people to just keep doing what they've been doing, right? They want people to just go with the flow. They don't care if you oppose what they're saying or what they're doing. The main thing that they're concerned with is just doing what they want to do, right? This is why when you have the extreme left in power, or you just watch how they move, they burn cars, they do crazy things. They're not concerned with public safety or making America be a greater place. You'll never hear a politician like AOC or Jasmine Crockett or Ilhan Omar or the other squad member, I'm forgetting her name, with the haircut like mine. But any one of them, you'll never hear them say, you know why I love this country? Because it's afforded me this opportunity, because it's afforded me that opportunity, because of what it helped my parents to achieve, because it lifted us out of poverty and allowed us to do things. You'll never hear them say anything like that. Because the truth is they resent this country for not being another country, for not being the Soviet Union, for not being communist Cuba, for not being communist China. They want more of that Marxist tyranny. And it's a sad thing, but it is. It is truly what they want. This is why they're never content. They're always fighting for something, right? They're always fighting. It's never a celebration. It's always fighting. And in turn, it puts us into fight mode where we have to fight against them. Kind of like when you watch them get arrested. The cops grab the person, then 10 of them will grab every last part of that person and try and play tug of war with a human to pull them away from the cops, right? This is the Antifa tactic. And you keep seeing it throughout these videos. The whole thing is baffling to me that people would give of their time. And one congressperson, I don't know which number it is, but I heard the clip where he was saying that we should leave everybody alone because, MS-13 doesn't have day jobs, and these people that are out there are just doing their jobs. These people that are out there are doing exactly what they shouldn't be doing, right? It's Rep. Jimmy Gomez. He was on CNN today. He says that MS-13 don't have day jobs, and ICE should leave the good people of California alone. I mean, what kind of dumb thing is that to say? The idea that ICE should just leave everyone alone when the president won on this mandate of enforcing immigration laws. It's ridiculous. But again, we're talking about the Democrats, in particular, California Democrats. So if that doesn't scream mental illness, I don't know what does. And that being said, I want to talk about a new book. It's called Freedom to Change. And I recommend it to all of the lefties, all of the progressives, all of the liberals, because you do have the freedom to change. And the subtitle on this, Understanding and Reshaping the Stressed Brain. So if Donald Trump stresses you out, if you're suffering from Trump derangement syndrome, I recommend this book, Freedom to Change, Understanding and Reshaping the Stressed Brain. And I say that all tongue-in-cheek. This is not a political book at all. And it's not for TDS solely. I'm sure you can use it for that. But it's really about people who deal with the stressed brain and have issues that go along with it and feel like a slave to what's been created by their stressed brain, or what we've learned about on this program known as stressed brain syndrome, which happens to children and can continue into adulthood. So the author of the book, the famous and beloved Dr. Vince Callahan, he is going to be joining us straight ahead. Don't go anywhere.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez. The best guests, the best opinions. This is America at Night with Rich Valdez.
All right, amigos, welcome back. Rich Valdez keeping you company all night long, or at least for another 40 minutes or so, and in this hour. And I want to talk to you about our guest, Dr. Vince Callahan. Now, he's a regular on here that we love to have a conversation with, but he's also a sought-after international speaker. He's a thought leader in his field. He promotes mental wellness, in particular with schools and children. He's got a lot of work to his name that he's talked about often on our program. And in his newest book, Freedom to Change, it comes from his groundbreaking research on the brain, particularly how stress affects every aspect of life in children and adults. Now, this book offers insight into how brain functions, and it also reveals how stress can alter those functions. So the book is going to give you some practical tools to transform the ingrained neural pathways that you currently have and turn those into positive behaviors. And I can't wait to get into this new book, Freedom to Change. Dr. Vince Callahan, welcome back, sir.
Thank you so much, man. I love being on your show, and I appreciate you doing this tonight and letting me be a part of your show.
No, thank you. I appreciate it, and I think so do the millions of listeners we have that really benefit from you being on. And if we can twist your arm, maybe tonight we'll do a little open phones with Dr. Callahan, where you can tell him what's going on and get a little advice from him. But first, I want to get into the book. And Dr. Callahan, you always bring some really very practical, very relatable, very down-to-earth advice when you come on. And we've talked about the stressed brain child and the stressed brain syndrome in previous conversations. But this new book, it talks about the freedom to change, how you can break away from that, which I think is fantastic, because at first you had to know you had it. Now we know we have it. Now you're teaching us how to get away from it with the freedom to change. And I'm really looking forward to learning about that. What was the impetus for this? Was this something you'd been planning for quite a while, or did one day it hit you where you said, you know what, I need to write about this?
Actually, I started my doctoral program at Regent University back in 2010. And the reason that I wanted to study this was I wanted to find out why my brother and I were so different growing up in the same home. And we had the same two parents, and we had, I thought the same situations, but I found out he went through some abusive things that I didn't go through, and we turned out the total opposite. And so I really began researching what happens to children when they experience certain kinds of trauma. And then I really began to understand what's called early life stress and how much that is impacting schools and classrooms. And just doing all this research on the brain, this is my 15th year of researching.
Wow. Well, let's take it from wherever you want to take it. I say take it from the top. You talked about, some of your personal background and how you and your brother are very different. And I can tell you, I have a bunch of brothers, and that's my experience with all of them, right, is that we're so different. And I always think because of the disparity in age or, in anything, there's so many things that kind of go into making us all different. But what did you find on that front?
Well, when you look at the term called early life stress, that is anything that has to do with physical abuse, sexual abuse, food insecurity, abandonment, constant yelling and arguing, adult drug addictions, or adult psychiatric disorders. And so, unfortunately, my brother experienced some of those things in his life when he was a toddler, and that set the tone for what was going to happen all in school throughout his life, and this way he problem solved and sought after things and did things that way. And so when you think about that big of an umbrella, you've got about 75% of all of the students in the classroom that fit one or more of these categories.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. As you were saying it, I was thinking, that sounds like most of the people I know would fit into there somehow.
Right. And so when they are children going through this, it actually changes the size and function of the brain. It changes how we regulate our emotions, how we think, process information, how we see the world, and how we lose our objectivity. We lose our ability to look at threats. We look at our critical thinking skills, executive functioning skills. There's all these things happening in the brain. You could tie this to what's going on in LA. We've got a bunch of people who have some really serious stressed brain issues that are putting them in those streets doing what they're doing because of what they've been through in their own life. And I can pretty much find any problem by looking at what they've been through in their life to get them to this point.
When you mention things that they've been through, whatever, that checklist you just read off, how does that affect the brain? I know you said it affects the brain. Does it affect it positively, negatively, or indifferently? Does it slow it down? What's the takeaway?
It affects it negatively. There's three things that children who go through this can't do. They can't regulate their emotions, they can't control their behavior, and they can't make friends. Those are the three main takeaways that are even all the way into adulthood of people who were stressed kids when they were young, but now they're stuck as adults. They have problems with their behavior, they have problems connecting socially, and they don't do well in even academics or problem solving or sometimes their own work, because those parts of the brain that should do all those functionings like we're supposed to as normal people without a stressed brain, those things are impacted in a very negative way so that people can't do those things even as adults.
What does that look like? This means that they're just problematic in those areas, or does this mean that they develop other problems like I had a different guest on that was explaining something about NPD, right? One of those personality disorders or a borderline personality disorder. Does what you're describing create these things, or are they, totally exclusive?
No, absolutely. They lead into other adult psychiatric disorders like narcissism, like borderline, like oppositional defiant behavior. They lead into all those things. And what happens for the adult on this side is they get stuck in those behaviors. They think this is who I am and all that I can be, and so they don't relate to people, and their life is not it's a survival mode more than a thriving mode. Because when the brain goes through these things, it clicks automatically into survival. It's called fight, flight, or freeze. We've all heard about that. But what actually happens is the brain gets stuck.
Well, Doc, hang on right there. The music means we got to go, and I don't want people to miss it. We're going to pick up from fight, flight, or freeze and what happens to people who have stressed brains. Again, we're talking about Dr. Callahan's new book, Freedom to Change, Understanding and Reshaping the Stressed Brain by Dr. Vince Callahan, founder of the Florida Institute for Neural Discovery, and me, Rich Valdez. We're coming right back. Keep it locked right here.
Your show. I love your views on things. I enjoy the interviews that you have, and I just wanted to say how much I appreciate you.
America at Night with Rich Valdez.
All right, amigos, welcome back. We continue our discussion on mental health with Dr. Vince Callahan. He's the founder of the Florida Institute for Neural Discovery, also known as FIND. You can catch him at drvincecallahan.com or FIND-FL.com, findflorida.com. And, Doc, we talked a little bit about your new book, and we're going to continue talking about it. Freedom to Change, Understanding and Reshaping the Stressed Brain. And as you were describing it, part of me, my brain works interestingly, maybe everybody's does, but part of me says, well, that's normal for everybody growing up. Then the other part of me says, well, maybe it's not so normal. But if you grew up, I know for me, nothing was ever calm and nice, right? Everything was always rushed and angry. My mom was always like, let's go, we're late, we got to do this, we got to do that, right? And I guess that does parlay into, how you grow up and how you become a quote-unquote type A personality kind of person that wants things done yesterday and lacks patience and things like that, which I think many of us write off as learned behaviors or whatever. But there might be more to it. I think some of us may be ill from those things. I don't think that I am, but I know people who have gone through things like this, kind of like what you're describing. I know people, siblings, that one is one way and the other is the other way, and like totally traumatized by the same household, the same parents, the same upbringing. So I want to continue, in that vein. But when you talk about the stressed brain and how things affect people, what are some of these things that go into that? And I guess really what we all want to know is, how do we cure it? Can it be cured?
So to start out with, the first thing that I'm going to talk to you about is called survival mode. Anytime there's a perceived threat, just a perceived threat, not even a real threat, if there's a perception of a threat, your brain goes into survival mode and you start secreting hormones and your heart rate goes up and all kinds of things. It's kind of like if you hear footsteps behind you when you're walking at night. Everything, your hair's on, you're standing up and back here on your neck there, and you're in fight, flight, or freeze mode. That's survival mode. Well, living in that 24/7 is what impacts the brain. And so anytime you have the thoughts of that perceived threat, you go back into that fight, flight, or freeze mode. That's why it takes 15 minutes for cortisol to peak. It takes 3 hours for it to go away when you have a fight with your spouse. If you try to resolve it in that first 3 hours without doing something to break that circuit, you're not going to end up in a good manner because you're still going to be in that fight mode.
Right.
So that's for all the couples out there. But yeah, to answer your question about changing it, we can change the neural pathways by changing the hormones within the brain, by changing the actions.
How do you do that?
Well, it's real simple. And this is what is so brilliant about this. It's just so simple. Your brain, cortisol is the stress hormone. It cannot live with other hormones in your brain except adrenaline. So if you do something nice or do something that you like or you achieve at something, that's going to release dopamine. Dopamine gets rid of cortisol. If you get a hug from somebody or you connect with somebody, that's oxytocin. That gets rid of cortisol. You can literally change, and this is what I teach teachers. It's so important. I teach them how to classroom manage based on relational learning techniques, and it doesn't cost millions of federal dollars, and it's not all new programs, but there's such a simple way to literally change Johnny's brain from being stressed out because he came to school, he woke up late, he didn't get his breakfast, his mom was yelling at him in the car, and all those kind of things that's going on in his brain. The teacher, he or she can change Johnny's neural pathways in just a matter of 15 seconds. And when they do that, you change from the survival mode into a thriving mode. Same thing with adults. When you get an adult who's stuck, I've worked with patients. I have patients right now that I'm using these techniques with. And I'll say, now, here's what we've got to do. We've got to get some affirmations going in your family, and we've got to get you doing some things that you like to do, and we've got to get you connected in the community, whether it's in church or whatever. We've got to change some of your behaviors. And if we'll change those neurotransmitters, guess what? We'll change your being stuck in survival mode. It works. I have seen it work in thousands of people, and I know that it's working.
And I think you've mentioned this a little bit. It has to do with things that are like very positive, things that are like words of praise. Is this the soul method? If somebody's freaking out, you go, hey, listen, you're really good at this. You're a good-looking person. You got a great head of hair. Give me a hug. Is that going to work every time?
That's going to work every time, but there's also other things that you can do. For instance, I have a patient that I prescribed. I need you to take 15 minutes a day for yourself. I need you to shut the phone off. I need you to shut everything off, and I need you to pull away from everybody, and I need you to sit and relax, put on some music if you want, but I need you to spend 15 minutes out of your day just for yourself. Do you know that she couldn't do that because she felt guilty of taking 15 minutes for herself?
Is she a mom? She had kids?
We've got a problem.
I know a lot of moms suffer from that. They can't find any time for themselves.
Right. But just think 15 minutes to relax your brain and not think about anything. and not dump the stress hormone through your brain and through the system. Just 15 simple minutes for yourself. That's one of the things that I tell people to do, and it works very easily. It really does.
Now, Doc, what are they supposed to do in that 15 minutes?
Relax. Do what you think is relaxing for you. For me, it's worship music. I'll put worship music on for 15 minutes. I'll shut the door to my office. I don't take a phone call. I don't look at emails. I don't do whatever. And I'm just, if you want to call it meditation, if you want to call it whatever, I'm just here listening to some music and relaxing. And I make myself do that every day because it keeps my brain healthy. But there's lots of techniques in the book. This is a great book for teachers, for parents. Give it as a Father's Day gift. It's on Amazon. It's on Barnes & Noble. And it just came out, and it's already selling, which is great. I'm excited to say that. And it took me 8 months of writing 8 to 10 hours a day to write this book. And so I'm very excited about it.
Well, so am I. And I want to make sure people buy it. And I want to recommend that they buy a copy for themselves and a copy to give away. Give one to your kid's teacher. The book is called Freedom to Change, Understanding and Reshaping the Stressed Brain by Dr. Vince Callahan. Dr. Vince, I want you to stick with me in case there's any callers that want to speak with you about what's going on. And I want to get your final thoughts as well with respect to the book and anything you may have missed. So, folks, we're coming right back with Dr. Vince Callahan.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez. Call now, 833-4VALDEZ. That's 833-482-5337. 833-4VALDEZ. That's Valdez with an S. Call now, 833-4VALDEZ. That's 833-482-5337. 833-4VALDEZ. That's Valdez with an S.
All right, now's your chance to talk to Dr. Vince Callahan by phone. And Todd in Atlanta has a question from WGKA, Atlanta, Georgia. Todd wants to know something about our diet and our brains. Todd, go right ahead. You're on with Rich Valdez and Dr. Vince Callahan.
Hey, thanks for taking my call, Dr. Callahan. My question is concerning the role the microbiome in the gut plays in producing neurotransmitters and how it's affected by the artificial dyes, and, all the sugar and all the junk and alcohol. What role does that play? And
It plays a huge role. You've got over 100 million neurons that are part of the communication process between your gut and your brain. And so when you get into red dye number 40, when you get into having a pound of sugar a year, when you get into all the sodas and alcohol and anything that turns into sugar, you're actually kind of like making the brain go kind of sludge-like. And you can make that turn into lots of different issues in the brain. So it's not healthy at all to do that. We need to get back to eating clean food and get some of this junk out of our lives. And I like what the secretary is doing as far as getting some of this stuff out and trying to get us back healthy eating again.
Yeah, I think that's a solid move, too. Todd in Atlanta, WGKA, thank you for your call. And Dr. Callahan, I think you're right. I myself did a little experiment with the red dye 40. I was dating a girl last year who told me about that and a couple other food dyes to stay away from because they cause distractibility and, messing around with my ADHD. And I felt a lot better since I've cut those out of my diet. And I was notorious for eating like gummies that had different food dyes in them. So it definitely makes a difference, as well as those artificial sugars, which I'm still guilty of using, but I use a lot less of. Now, again, you're on Amazon. Give everybody the best place to get a copy of the book and the best place to follow you.
Best place to follow me is on the social media platforms. I'm on X and Instagram and Facebook and all the basic things. also on the website, drvincecallahan.com. The book is also on our website, and it's on it's in Barnes & Noble and it's in Amazon. So they can get the book there, and it's a great gift. It's great for teachers like you're talking about. And the book is very practical and very simple, but it's very meaty. It's a really good read, and I'm happy with the work that I've turned out. I really am proud of what I've done, and I really appreciate you having me on the show and letting me promote the book, and let's get it out there to folks, because I want to help kids change their learning trajectories. Kids who go under this stuff, they have a greater chance of broken relationships, incarcerations, and developing psychiatric disorders, and we've got to change that tide in America.
Listen, Doc, you're speaking my language. You know, I think those are the things that really affect people from the top to the bottom. Those are it. And you know, I know in your work you've looked into traumatic brain injury, TBI. I dealt with my dad, who was a TBI person, and it was, you know, I learned so much about, you know, through happenstance and through just practical caregiving about how that works and about regenerating pathways in the brain. So as you're talking about that, I'm thinking about, you know, teaching my dad how to tie his shoe again at, you know, 70 years old. And these are very interesting things, but they work and they're real. And you can retrain your brain. It's oftentimes it's our habits that are harder to retrain than our brain. But once you do it, I think the habits fall right in line. Dr. Vince, any final words?
No, just thank you again. And like I say, the book is out, and I think it's a great book for teachers, especially because it gives practical classroom management tools. And so the last final thought, I will say this: many times ADD gets misdiagnosed when it's actually a stressed brain.
Look at that. Maybe that's what I've got. Folks, check out the book. It's called Freedom to Change, Understanding and Reshaping the Stressed Brain. I'm definitely going to read it, and I recommend you get a copy for yourself, one to give away. Go to drvincecallahan.com. Pick up the book on Amazon or wherever you get your books. Dr. Vince Callahan, good luck with the book. Anything we could do to help, happy to do it. Godspeed to you, sir.
Thank you so much, Rich. I appreciate you.
You bet. Same here. And amigos, to the phones we go. Let's go. Let's go right now. Let's go to the phones. I want to go to Tommy, Charleston, West Virginia, WCHS. Tommy, go right ahead.
Mr. Valdez, I want to thank you for the rant, I believe was the way it's being described. I'm presuming the gentleman's Mexican-American.
Yes, he was.
And he's saying they should be ashamed of themselves to waving the Mexican flag. And I do find it so odd that you have people there waving the Mexican flag when, let's look at the immigration crisis from its basic perspective. Here are people by the hundreds of thousands or millions, as the case may be, over the course of a few years or in recent times, coming from all these nations which, we're told, are non-racist, diversity-fest places in Central and South America and wherever in the world. And, of course, they want to take every dime they've got to pay a gangster to get them there, and every bit of their person, etc., so that they could get across the border and enter the United States of America either illegally or through some legal gimmickry available at a given point in time, so they can enter that evil, racist America and make a living full-time for the first time in their lives. And then when you get a president who says, hey, we need a sane border, you can't be doing this stuff anymore, they're waving the Mexican flag. What sense does it make? It says, here in Mexico, we're all messed up. South, we're even worse. America, you evil racists, we can't wait to get there. What sense does any of that
make? Well, it doesn't, Tommy. And you know what's interesting about this is, and it's always been my contention here, with these guys, I can guarantee you the guy riding the Harley Davidson and waving that Mexican flag, I would bet you anything that guy was born in the United States to Mexican parents who are probably immigrants who probably don't even agree with him. And that's the problem. You get these guys that are being used as useful idiots trying to take up for a cause, likely from what our first guest and our yesterday and a couple of our guests this week have been talking about, is that a lot of this stuff is just the cartels flexing their muscle because they're losing out on business. They can't traffic the same way, whether it's people or drugs, and they're losing money to the tune of hundreds of billions of dollars. So when that becomes a reality for the cartels, guess what? They're going to use their pull with these gangs to do what has to be done. And I think we're seeing that. And because by and large, the people that are in the streets, I can guarantee you, are not crazy lefties that came from El Salvador or Guatemala or anywhere else. Those people did come here to work. And the ones that came here to wreak havoc are wreaking havoc, but they don't want to get caught, right? the Tren de Aragua gang members and whatnot. These are gang members that are here already. And we had a former gang member on yesterday, the night before, explaining how these gangs work. And it really is just bizarre. But this is what it is. You've got people that are American, many white liberals behind this, that are pushing this to make it look like something that it's not. And it's shameful. I think the rant that you're describing was right. They should be ashamed of themselves. Amigos, we're coming to the rest of your calls. Florida, Vermont, South Carolina. Don't go anywhere.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez.
Elon Musk looking to make peace with President Trump?
It appears that way, George. Elon Musk this morning is expressing some remorse, posting, quote, "I regret some of my posts about President Trump last week. They went too far," though he doesn't say which posts he feels went too far. Musk, of course, spent a lot of last week ripping into the president over his budget bill, his tariffs, even suggesting impeachment and leveling that deeply personal attack, accusing the president of being involved in the Epstein files. But, George, I think it's safe to say that after the implosion we saw last week, it's going to take a lot more than one post to repair this relationship.
Mary Bruce, thanks.
So Elon Musk says he went too far. I want to know what you think. 833-4-VALDEZ. Let's go to Lester, Daytona Beach, Florida, WTTB. Lester, go right ahead quickly.
Thank you. If Donald Trump can find a use for Musk, that's fine. But I hope he doesn't trust him.
Yeah, and I think you're right. He's got to be able to be, use him for whatever he's good for, but can't let him in that close. At least that would be my contention as well. I trust you as far as I can physically throw you. Thank you, Lester, for the call. Shout out to WTTB. Let me see. Where do we go? My man, Jerome, Charleston, South Carolina. Oh, man, the music means no Jerome. Jerome, I owe you. Give me a call tomorrow. Said Trump's going to run out of people to send to L.A. No, we're not, man. We got a draft. We've hit our recruitment number early, 5 months into the year. Come on, man. There's plenty of people that want. I would take a week off of work just to go crack some heads and shoot some water cannons and whatnot. Anyway, amigos, hasta la próxima. Tony, thank you for your call as well. Take care. Good night. God bless you, America.